Hello everyone, I'm Justin and this is everything you need to know before watching Spider-Man No Way Home. Real quick, if you're watching this video and you haven't yet subscribed, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to know anytime we upload a new video. Spider-Man No Way Home looks to bring all of Sony's Spider-Man universes together, as the MCU is expanding on its multiverse. So you'll need to know about each of the 4 live-action Spider-Man universes they've created. When we first meet Peter Parker in 2016, he's a 15-year-old high school student. His parents passed away when he was young, so he was raised by his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, until his uncle also passed away, though we haven't learned exactly how he died. One day, Peter gets bitten by a radioactive spider and gains incredible powers. Motivated by the memory of his uncle, Peter chooses to use his powers to help the people of New York as Spider-Man. His best friend Ned Leeds is the first to learn of his secret identity, after he's seen climbing into his room through the window, not noticing Ned was already in there waiting for him. After Spider-Man starts to go viral, he is recruited by Tony Stark, also known as Iron Man, for help during a dispute that caused the Avengers to fight amongst one another. Soon after the Avengers Civil War, Peter faces his first supervillain, the Vulture Adrian Toomes. Before becoming the Vulture, Toomes was a salvage company owner who was contracted to clean up the city following the Battle of New York, where the Avengers fought against Loki and the Chitauri army. After he's driven out of business by the Department of Damage Control, a partnership between Tony Stark and the US government, he persuades his employees to use the Chitauri technology that they already salvaged to create advanced weapons. After coming across these advanced weapons, Peter attempts to stop Toomes and his employees, but Tony intervenes and tells Peter to stick to being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Peter doesn't listen to Tony's advice and continues to pursue Toomes. He nearly captures him aboard the Staten Island ferry, but Toomes is able to escape. Peter does, however, manage to capture his new buyer, Mac Gargan. As Toomes escapes, he leaves a malfunctioning weapon behind that tears the ferry in half. Luckily, Iron Man arrives in time to help Peter save everyone on board. Tony is pissed at Peter for not taking his advice and being reckless, so he confiscates the suit he created for him.
This is all I have. I'm nothing without this suit.
If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it.
Peter quits his pursuit of Toomes and goes back to his high school life. He builds up the courage to ask his crush Liz to go to the homecoming dance with him, and she says yes. But on the night of the dance, Peter learns that Liz's father is actually Adrian Toomes. Toomes is able to figure out Peter's secret identity in a really well-made scene, and threatens to kill him if he tries to interfere with his plans again. But Peter decides to ditch homecoming and go after Toomes anyway, and finds him in the middle of a hijacking of a damage control plane. Peter's able to steer it off course and crash it on a beach near Coney Island. He and Toomes brawl, and it ends with Peter saving his life after part of the Vulture's exosuit malfunctions and explodes. Toomes is then found by the police, but he decides to keep Spider-Man's identity to himself out of respect for saving his life. Tony apologizes to Peter for taking his suit and admits he was wrong for doubting him. He then returns the suit and we see Peter putting it on in his apartment as his Aunt May walks in. We don't see Spider-Man on screen again until 2018 when he sees an alien spaceship landing on Earth out of the window of a school bus during a class trip to the Museum of Modern Art. The spaceship was sent by Thanos, a superhuman from the planet Titan who sends his army, known as the Children of Thanos, throughout the universe to collect the Infinity Stones so that he can bring stability to the universe by wiping out half of all life, as he believes its massive population will inevitably cause it to perish. Ned causes a distraction that allows Peter to exit the bus so that he can help Iron Man and Doctor Strange fight against 2 of the Children of Thanos, Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian. Dr. Stephen Strange was once a renowned but arrogant neurosurgeon until a car accident severely injured his hands. When modern medicine failed him, he embarked on a journey to Carnage, where he was trained by the Ancient One. He healed his hands and eventually became a master of the mystic arts, serving as Earth's protector against any mystical threats. He is also in possession of the Time Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones. The Children of Thanos attempt to take it from him, but he's casted a spell on it, so they plan to take him back to their spaceship and torture him until he gives up the stone. Spider-Man chases after them and is able to scoop up Strange, but as he tries to get away, he and Strange get beamed up onto the spaceship. Peter's stuck on the side of the ship as it's flying back up to space, and after running out of air, he passes out and falls back down to Earth. But he's luckily caught by a new suit Stark created for him.
Mr. Stark, it smells like a new car in here.
Peter and Tony are able to get aboard the spaceship and kill Cull Obsidian and Ebony Maw. They decide that they're going to bring the fight to Thanos, and so they land on his home planet Titan. By the time Thanos gets back on Titan, he has already collected 4 of the 6 Infinity Stones. They still go ahead with their attack on Thanos and nearly remove his Infinity Gauntlet, but he's able to overpower them. After collecting the Time Stone, he goes to Earth and collects the final Infinity Stone, and with the power of the 6 stones, he wipes out half of all life, including Spider-Man and about half of the Avengers, with a single snap of his fingers. 3 weeks after the snap, the remaining Avengers find Thanos in retirement on a faraway planet, and after learning he destroyed the Infinity Stones, Thor beheads him. 5 years later, in the year 2023, the Avengers figure out a way to travel through time to collect the Infinity Stones from past timelines, and bring back everyone that was lost. As they're collecting the stones, a 2014 variant of Thanos learns of their plans and follows them back to their timeline. Hulk then puts on the Infinity Gauntlet and snaps his fingers to bring back everyone lost in the blip. Just then, 2014 Thanos and his army arrive, and a huge battle ensues. It ends when Tony uses the power of the Infinity Stones and sacrifices himself to wipe out Thanos and his army. The Avengers then return the stones to their respective timelines, and 8 months later, Peter is back in high school where we learn his best friend Ned was also lost in the blip. We also learn that Peter now has a crush on his classmate Michelle Jones and plans to confess his feelings to her during the school's summer field trip to Europe. Peter's life as Spider-Man has become even more stressful, with the media looking for the next Tony Stark following his death, and Peter feels the responsibility has fallen onto him. But he doesn't think he's ready for that, and uses the trip to Europe to try and get away from these new responsibilities. He even ignores phone calls from Nick Fury, the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the founder of the Avengers. Not too long after he and his classmates arrive in Venice, a water elemental attacks the city. Peter attempts to fight the creature and is met by Quentin Beck, also known as Mysterio, who claims to be from an alternate reality within the multiverse that was destroyed by the elementals. He and Peter are able to defeat the creature, and that night, Peter is finally tracked down by Fury, who's come to bring Peter to a meeting with Mysterio. On their way to meet Beck, Fury gives Peter a pair of glasses left for him by Tony Stark, with a built-in AI named Edith that gives him access to Stark Industries' global satellite network, along with an arsenal of missiles and drones. Mysterio predicts the fire elemental will appear in Prague, and Fury invites Peter to join them in their fight against it, but Peter declines. He goes back to his class trip, but Fury is able to secretly change their planned route and redirect them to Prague. Peter is forced to help fight the fire elemental, of which he and Beck manage to destroy. Fury is upset with Peter for seemingly not wanting to be there, and questions if Stark was right about him. Seeing Peter upset, Mysterio invites him to go celebrate their victory. They talk about the responsibilities they have as superheroes, and we learn that Peter wishes he could just go back to his trip and tell MJ how he really feels about her. In that moment, Peter realizes that the responsibilities of the next Iron Man would be in better care with Beck, so Peter transfers the control of Edith to him. Once Peter leaves, we learn this was Beck's plan all along. Before creating the illusion of Mysterio, Quentin Beck was an employee at Stark Industries who created a holographic system that was disregarded by Stark, and Beck was later fired due to his instability. Seeking retribution, Beck joined forces with other former Stark employees and used their combat drones and his own hologram technology to create the illusion of Mysterio, as well as the multiple attacks from the fictional elementals. He now plans to use Edith and Stark Industries' orbital weapons drones to create even larger illusions to depict Mysterio as an even greater superhero. When Peter gets back to his trip, he asks MJ to hang out, and she agrees. Peter then tries to confess his attraction towards her.
MJ,
I'm Spider-Man.
What?
She reveals that she's been watching him for a while and says she saw him fighting with Beck against the fire elemental. She shows him a piece of debris she picked up during the fight, but it turns out to be a broken off piece of one of Beck's drones. After he begins playing part of the air elemental's attack, Peter reveals to her that he really is Spider-Man and that he's messed up very badly. He goes to Berlin to meet with Nick Fury and tell him about Beck's illusions, but the Fury he meets with is actually an illusion created by Beck, who learned that MJ had taken the broken off piece of the drone. Beck uses his illusions to maneuver Peter in front of an oncoming train and assumes he's been killed. With Spider-Man out of the way, Beck plans to go to London and use his biggest illusion yet to increase his status as a superhero, as well as kill MJ and Ned since they know Mysterio is a fake. Meanwhile, Peter has ended up in the Netherlands, where he is picked up by Happy Hogan in a private jet. They figure out where Beck's next illusion will be and fly to London to stop him. Peter is able to get inside the illusion and dismantle it from within. He then fights Mysterio, who tries to use the drones against him, but Peter defeats him and takes back control of Edith. Beck seemingly dies after being accidentally shot in the stomach by one of his drones, but we see one of Beck's employees escape with data from the drones. Peter and MJ finally confess their feelings to one another, and after returning to New York, they begin their relationship. But Peter's life takes a turn for the worse when J. Jonah Jameson of the Daily Bugle shows on the news a video of Mysterio before his death. In the video, Mysterio claims to have been killed by Spider-Man and that it was Spider-Man who was behind the drone attacks. He then reveals that Spider-Man's true identity is Peter Parker. When we first meet Peter Parker in the year 2002, he's an 18-year-old high school student. His parents passed away when he was young, so he was raised by his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. We also learn that Peter is in love with his classmate and neighbor, Mary Jane Watson, but he has yet to build up the courage to tell her his true feelings. One day, while on a senior trip to Columbia University's science department, Peter gets bitten by a radioactive spider and gains incredible powers. He realizes the true nature of his abilities the next day at school after he easily beats his bully, Flash Thompson, who is also MJ's boyfriend, in a fight. He later apologizes to MJ for his actions before Flash comes to pick her up with his new car. After hearing how much she likes the car, Peter plans to take part in a wrestling event that will pay him $3,000 for 3 minutes in the ring. His Uncle Ben offers to give him a ride there so they can talk. His aunt and uncle have become worried about him, with him getting into that fight at school and skipping out on his chores. Ben warns Peter to be careful of the man he turns into.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Peter then takes part in the wrestling event and defeats his opponent, Bonesaw McGraw. But when he goes to collect his prize money, he's only paid $100 since he technically only fought 2 minutes. As a frustrated Peter exits, another man walks in and robs the showrunner. And although Peter could stop him from escaping, he decides to let him get away as an act of revenge. On his way home, Peter sees a crowd of people surrounding a wounded man who he realizes is his Uncle Ben. While Ben was on his way to pick up Peter, the burglar that Peter let get away shot him and drove off in his car. Ben dies from his wound, and so Peter, motivated by the memory of his uncle, chooses to use his powers to help the people of New York as Spider-Man. Spider-Man. Peter soon faces his first supervillain, the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn is the father of Peter's best friend Harry, and founder of a major research and manufacturing firm, Oscorp. He had been working on a serum to enhance human performance and performs the first human test on himself. The serum gives Norman powers similar to a super soldier, but also enhances his bad qualities and turns him evil. After he learns that the board of directors of Oscorp plan on selling his company, he shows up at Oscorp Industries' Unity Day festival as the Green Goblin to kill them. Peter, MJ, and Harry are also at the festival, with Peter now working as a photographer for the Daily Bugle under J. Jonah Jameson after bringing in high-quality photos of Spider-Man, and MJ and Harry there as a couple following her breakup with Flash, where Harry was there to comfort her. The Green Goblin arrives on a glider and uses a pumpkin bomb to kill Oscorp's board of directors and nearly kills MJ, but Spider-Man is able to damage the glider, forcing him to exit. Later, Green Goblin is able to ambush Spider-Man by pretending to be a woman trapped in a burning building. In the ensuing fight, Peter is slashed on the arm by one of Goblin's razor bats. The next time we see Peter and Norman, they're at a Thanksgiving dinner with Aunt May, Harry, and MJ. This is where Norman realizes Peter is Spider-Man after seeing he has the slash on his forearm from the earlier fight. So that night, Norman attacks Aunt May as the Green Goblin. Peter realizes that Green Goblin must know who he is and is coming after the people he loves. So he calls MJ to make sure she's okay, but instead he hears Norman cackle into the phone. Peter finds Green Goblin at the Roosevelt Bridge, holding MJ in one hand and a trolley of innocent children in the other. Goblin tries to force Peter to choose who to save, but Peter is able to catch MJ and the trolley before they hit the ground. They then fight once again, with Green Goblin having the upper hand for most of it. But as he goes for a fatal stab, Peter catches the weapon and launches him back into a brick wall. Peter continues to pummel Goblin, leading him to reveal his true identity as he begs Peter to stop. Peter is in shock, and Norman uses the opportunity to try and kill him. But Peter dodges his attack, and Norman is killed by his own machine. At Norman's funeral, Harry tells Peter that one day he'll make Spider-Man pay since he believes Spider-Man killed his father. MJ comes to Peter later to finally confess her feelings to him and give him a kiss. But Peter decides he can't be with her if he wants her to be safe. Over the next 2 years, Peter continues living his double life, but we see it's beginning to take a toll on him. He's been having trouble financially and academically, as well as being estranged from MJ and Harry, and he starts thinking about giving up being Spider-Man. At Peter's birthday party, we learn that Harry is now head of special projects at Oscorp, and that they're sponsoring a fusion-powered project by nuclear scientist Otto Octavius, one of Peter's idols. Harry introduces him to Octavius, who befriends and mentors Peter. For the fusion experiment, Octavius wears a harness of powerful robotic arms with artificial intelligence. Though the experiment succeeds at first, it quickly becomes unstable, but Octavius refuses to shut it down, causing Spider-Man to intervene. Octavius' wife Rosalie is killed in the accident, and the neural inhibitor chip, which prevented the arms from influencing his mind, is destroyed, and the arms are fused to his spine. Octavius is taken to a hospital, but the tentacles now have a mind of their own and kill the medical crew. The tentacles corrupt Octavius' mind and convince him that he must complete his experiment. To fund his experiment, Doc Ock attempts to rob a bank, but Peter just so happened to be at the same bank with his Aunt May, so Spider-Man and Doc Ock brawl. Recently, Peter had been suffering from temporary losses of his powers, and that continues during their fight. Doc Ock kidnaps Aunt May in an attempt to get away, but Peter's eventually able to save her, though Otto does manage to escape with the loot stolen from the bank. Later, while Peter's swinging throughout the city as Spider-Man, he once again suffers a loss of his powers. He has a vision of his Uncle Ben where he confesses he no longer wants to be Spider-Man, and eventually decides to just be Peter Parker. After giving up on his double life, he's able to improve his grades and financial situation. He also begins rebuilding his relationship with MJ. Meanwhile, Doc Ock has finished rebuilding his device, but he needs tritium for the reactor. So he goes to get it from Harry, and Harry agrees to give it to him in exchange for Spider-Man so he can avenge his father's death. Harry tells Otto that Peter might know where Spider-Man is since he was his photographer. So Otto tracks down Peter and attacks him during his lunch with MJ. Octavius kidnaps MJ and threatens to kill her if Spider-Man doesn't meet him at the West Side Tower. So Peter returns to Spider-Man to save MJ. He and Doc Ock brawl at the top of the tower and all the way down onto a moving train, where Otto destroys the train's speed bar. Peter incredibly manages to stop the speeding train just before it falls off the unfinished track. After using all of his energy to stop the train, Doc Ock is easily able to knock him unconscious and take him to Harry. After giving Otto the tritium, Harry goes to kill Spider-Man, but drops his knife when he learns it's Peter under the mask. Peter then wakes up and convinces Harry to tell him where Otto is. Peter arrives at Doc Ock's lab as he starts up the fusion reactor. They fight once again, and it ends with Peter electrocuting Otto and ridding him of the robotic arm's influence. Peter reveals his identity to Otto and begs him to help stop the reactor. Otto says the only way to stop it is to drown it in the river, and says he'll do it himself. So Otto sacrifices his life to drown the reactor as Peter escapes with MJ, who had still been kidnapped by Doc Ock. Meanwhile, a heartbroken Harry begins seeing visions of his father in a mirror, ordering Harry to avenge him. Enraged, Harry shatters the mirror and finds a room hidden behind it containing all of the Green Goblin's equipment. Peter and MJ finally begin a relationship, and for the next few months, they seem to be happy together. Harry and Peter, on the other hand, seemingly haven't spoken since Harry learned he was Spider-Man. Since graduating high school, MJ has managed to build a successful acting career, and we see Peter and Harry attending one of her shows. After the show, Peter tries to clear the air with Harry, but Harry still believes Peter killed his father. When Harry gets home, he decides to inject himself with the Goblin serum and plans to attack Peter. Meanwhile, Peter and MJ are out looking up at the stars. They reaffirm their love for each other and have a passionate kiss, but without them noticing, a symbiote crashes onto Earth from outer space, and as they leave, it attaches itself to Peter's bike. While Peter is on his way home, he is attacked by Harry. They fight throughout the city, and it ends after Peter causes Harry to hit his head on a pipe. This leaves Harry with short-term amnesia, making him forget his vendetta with Peter Peter and Spider-Man. We're then introduced to Flint Marko, an escaped convict who went into a life of crime to help pay for treatment for his terminally ill daughter. We see him being chased by the police before falling into an experimental particle accelerator that molecularly binds him with sand, turning him into the Sandman. Later, using his new shape-shifting abilities, he attempts to rob an armored car. Spider-Man arrives and the two fight, but Sandman manages to overpower him before escaping. The next day, Peter is called into a police station where he is told the true identity of his uncle's killer, and it turns out to be Flint Marko. Peter is enraged that his uncle's killer is still out there, and waits by his police radio scanner hoping to hear of Marko's whereabouts. Peter becomes tired and falls asleep, and as he's sleeping, the symbiote attaches itself to his suit. The symbiote amplifies characteristics of its host, especially violence and aggression. So when Peter learns of Marko's whereabouts, he dons the black suit and plans to kill him. He finds Marko hiding underground, and the two fight once again, until Sandman falls into a large puddle of water. Peter realizes water is a weakness of Sandman's, so he opens a large water pipe and drowns the Sandman in it. He believes he has killed Marko, but we later learn that he survived. Throughout all of this, Peter's relationship with MJ has become strained, with MJ feeling that Peter cares more about being a celebrity as Spider-Man than being with her. The two become distant for a while, and MJ finds solace in Harry. They spend some time together that eventually leads to a kiss, but MJ regrets it immediately and exits. Shortly after she exits, Harry begins getting visions of his father once again. He is reminded of his vendetta and plans to go after Peter's heart. Harry then attacks MJ and threatens to kill her and Peter if she doesn't do what he says. He forces her to break up with Peter and say she's fallen in love with someone else. Harry meets with Peter later and tells him that he's that someone else MJ was talking about. Heartbroken and filled with rage, Peter dons the black suit once again and attacks Harry later that night. They have a relatively one-sided brawl that ends with Peter using a pumpkin bomb to disfigure half of Harry's face. Peter continues to wear the symbiote bonded suit and embraces the violence and aggression that comes with it. Peter's been working at the Daily Bugle for the last few years, bringing in photos of Spider-Man, but their new hire, Eddie Brock, wants to take Peter's spot. There just so happens to be an opening for a staff job at the Bugle, so Jonah Jameson says he'll give it to whoever can bring him a photo of Spider-Man being the menace he believes him to be. After being unable to get a photo of Spider-Man with his hand in the cookie jar, Brock brings in a photoshopped image. Peter confronts Eddie and humiliates him in front of everyone at the Bugle.
Parker, you are such a Boy Scout. When are you gonna give a guy a break?
You want forgiveness? Get religion.
Eddie is subsequently fired, and after seeing Peter out with his former love interest, Gwen Stacy, Eddie becomes depressed and goes to church to pray for Peter's death. Peter happens to be at the same church, attempting to take off the symbiote bonded suit after realizing it was changing him for the worse. Peter struggles to take off the suit, but manages to remove it after weakening the symbiote with the sound of the church's bell. Eddie, meanwhile, had followed the sounds of Peter's struggles and the bell, and realized that Peter is Spider-Man. The symbiote then drops down onto Eddie and attaches itself to him, turning him into Venom. Venom tracks down the Sandman and forms a partnership with him in an attempt to kill Spider-Man. They kidnap MJ to learn Peter, but before going to save her, he goes to see Harry and asks him for his help. Harry declines at first, but eventually decides to help after learning that his father was killed by his own machine and not Spider-Man. Harry and Peter are able to bring MJ to safety before taking out the Sandman. They then fight Venom, who's able to get a hold of Harry's glider. He goes to impale Peter with it, but Harry jumps in front to save him and is fatally wounded. Peter then uses the sound of several pipes to weaken the symbiote before freeing Eddie from it. He grabs a pumpkin bomb and throws it at the symbiote just as Eddie attempts to rebond with it, killing him and destroying the symbiote. Sandman appears once again, but instead of fighting Peter, he apologizes for killing his uncle, saying it was an accident and that he regrets it deeply. Peter forgives him and allows Marko to escape. Peter and Harry then have a heart-to-heart before Harry passes away. A little while later, we see Peter attend a singing performance by MJ, and the last shot we see is of them dancing together, beginning to mend their relationship. When we first meet Peter Parker in 2012, he's a 17-year-old high school student. His parents, Richard and Mary Parker, died in a plane crash when he was young after leaving him in the care of his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, while they went off to continue their research for Oscorp, of which Richard was employed. At school, we meet Peter's bully Flash Thompson, after he knocks Peter down for defending a fellow student that he was picking on. We then meet Gwen Stacy, Peter's crush, who says she admires Peter's act of bravery. One day, while cleaning out his flooded basement with his uncle, Peter finds his father's old suitcase. In the suitcase, he finds a photo of his father and Dr. Curt Connors, a scientist who lost his arm many years ago, leading him to study cross-species genetics to try and find a cure. In an attempt to learn more about why his father left, Peter sneaks into Oscorp posing as one of their interns, and manages to get inside a biocable lab. The lab is full of radioactive spiders that Oscorp had tested on, and after Peter touches one of the webs, the spiders fall down onto him. He's able to knock off most of them, but he doesn't notice one of them is still stuck on his back until it bites him. The bite gives him incredible powers that he realizes the true nature of while on the subway after accidentally knocking out a group of thugs. To get a better understanding of his new abilities, Peter goes to Dr. Connor's house and introduces himself himself as Richard Parker's son. Connors explains why he never reached out and why his and Richard's cross-species research was stopped. And this leads Peter to give him his father's decay rate algorithm that he found inside his father's suitcase. The next day at school, Peter uses his powers to confront Flash and humiliates him by putting him on a poster. His uncle isn't happy about this since it caused him to have to change shifts at work, and he tells Peter that he's gonna have to pick up his Aunt May later that night. But Peter goes to Oscorp to work with Dr. Connors and forgets to pick her up. Ben is now even more frustrated with him and tells him he needs to be more responsible.
If you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
Peter angrily storms out after being lectured and goes to a convenience store. Peter doesn't have enough money for the drink he wanted to buy, and the cashier gives him an attitude. As Peter goes to leave without the drink, the guy in line behind him robs the store, and although Peter could stop him, he chooses not to. As the guy's running away, he bumps into Uncle Ben, who is out looking for Peter, and drops his gun. Ben attempts to stop him from picking it up, but the thief ends up shooting Ben in the stomach. Peter finds him soon after as he dies from his wound, and so Peter, motivated by the memory of his uncle, chooses to use his powers to help the people of New York as Spider-Man. Back at Oscorp, Dr. Connors is being pressured by Dr. Rajit Ratha to begin human trials for the formula Peter helped him complete. Ratha threatens that he'll suffer the same fate as Richard Parker if it doesn't get done, so a desperate Connors performs the first human test on himself. Though the test appears to have succeeded at first, it slowly turns Connors into a human-lizard hybrid, referred to as simply the Lizard. Meanwhile, Peter gets invited by Gwen Stacy to have dinner with her family, where we meet her father George, who we learn is captain of the New York Police Department. Peter and George get into an argument over whether or not Spider-Man is an outlaw or if he's just trying to help innocent people, and Gwen tries to break the tension by taking Peter outside. He goes on to tell her that he's actually Spider-Man before giving her a kiss. He then leaves after hearing multiple cop cars in the distance, which leads him to his first encounter with the Lizard. The next day, Peter goes to see Dr. Connors to get a better understanding of what this creature may be, during which Peter begins to suspect Connors is actually the Lizard. Later, Peter finds the Lizard hiding in the sewers and the two brawl. Lizard gets the upper hand, but Peter manages to escape. But the Lizard is able to learn his identity after Peter leaves his camera behind. So the Lizard finds Peter at school and attacks him. The two fight throughout the school that ends with the Lizard retreating back into the sewers. Peter follows him and finds Dr. Connors' underground lab, where he learns that the Lizard is heading to Oscorp to get a machine that will release a toxic cloud causing all humans to turn into a lizard hybrid. But on Peter's way there, he is surrounded by the police and unmasked by Gwen's father George. Realizing it's Peter under the mask, George agrees to work together to stop the Lizard. Peter finds the Lizard as he's starting up the machine, and the two brawl once again. The Lizard gets the upper hand and nearly strangles Peter to death. But George Stacy arrives in time to help Peter thwart the Lizard's attack. Captain Stacy repeatedly shoots the Lizard with his shotgun, but it has no effect and the Lizard fatally stabs Stacy with his claws. Still, Spider-Man is able to replace the machine with an antidote to Connor's serum and release the cloud, causing the Lizard to turn back into Dr. Connors, who was sent to prison for his actions. Peter then finds a dying Captain Stacy who asks for Peter to promise that as long as he's Spider-Man, he'll stay away from Gwen. But unfortunately, that's a promise that Peter just can't keep, and he continues his relationship with Gwen and his life of fighting crime. The next time we see Spider-Man is during a pursuit of a group of criminals carrying a truck full of dangerous chemicals called plutonium through the city, led by Alexei Sitsevich. During the chase, he saves the life of a man named Max Dillon before apprehending the criminals. Max Dillon is an electrical engineer for Oscorp Industries, who is seen as a nobody before being acknowledged by Spider-Man, who he becomes obsessed with. The next time we see Max is on his birthday, where he is forced to stay behind at work by his boss, Alistair Smythe, to fix a broken power line. But after he plugs the line back in, Max is shocked with electricity, causing him to fall down into a tank of genetically modified electric eels. He is attacked by the eels, and the attack changes him into a human mass of electricity, naming himself Electro. Meanwhile, Peter goes to visit his former best friend Harry Osborn after hearing on the news that his father Norman had died. Norman Osborn was the CEO and founder of Oscorp Industries, and after dying from a rare genetic disease, his son Harry takes over Oscorp. As the two catch up, they're watched by Donald Mencken, a member of Oscorp's board of directors who's trying to get Harry out of the company and keep the Max Dillon incident hidden from the public. But that night, Max wanders throughout the city looking for electricity to power himself, but he accidentally shuts off the power to Times Square. Chaos ensues and police surround Max, but he uses his newfound powers against them. Spider-Man shows up, and after recognizing Max, he tries to calm the situation down. But after the police shoot at him, Max thinks Spider-Man has betrayed him and attacks. The two fight, and it ends with Spider-Man using a fire hose to take out Max, who is then taken to Oscorp to be tested. Harry, meanwhile, is beginning to show symptoms of the same disease his father had as he looks through Oscorp's files. He finds a video of his father and Richard Parker talking about their plans to create human spider hybrids to treat diseases. Although they never made it to human trials, Harry believes that Spider-Man was bitten by one of these radioactive spiders, proving that it could work. So he meets with Peter and asks Peter to bring him a sample of Spider-Man's blood, since Peter now works as Spider-Man's photographer for the Daily Bugle. Peter meets with Harry later as Spider-Man, but says he won't give him his blood because he is unsure of what effects the transfusion would have. Meanwhile, the board board of directors at Oscorp used the accident involving Max Dillon to remove Harry from his position as CEO by framing Max's death on him. But before they kicked him out, Harry had looked through Oscorp's archived files where he found that they were experimenting on Max at the Ravencroft Institute, and that they still have the venom from the radioactive spiders. So Harry goes to Ravencroft and convinces Max to help him break into Oscorp, and says in return he'll help bring him to Spider-Man. After breaking into Oscorp, Harry injects himself with the spider's venom, and although it heals him at first, it begins accelerating his illness, and transforms him into the Green Goblin. While Peter was at home looking through his father's old belongings, he finds information that leads him to a hidden lab where his father left a video message for him. In the video, Richard explains how he had to leave when Peter was young because he wasn't willing to go along with Norman Osborn's plans to create biological weapons. We also learn that the reason Peter survived the radioactive spider's bite was because Richard implanted his own blood into the spiders. Harry, however, is able to survive after crawling to his suit with an emergency protocol that restores his health. Meanwhile, Electro had shut off New York City's power, so Spider-Man finds him and they brawl once again. Spider-Man, with the help of Gwen, is able to defeat Electro by restoring the city's powder and overloading Electro's body. Moments after Electro is defeated, Green Goblin shows up on a glider to confront Spider-Man. Harry realizes Spider-Man's true identity after seeing him and Gwen together, since he learned Peter had been dating her. So Harry grabs Gwen and takes her to the top of a clock tower, and although Peter is able to subdue Harry, Gwen falls down the tower. Peter manages to catch her with a web, but he isn't able to stop her momentum as she hits the floor, dying from the impact. Peter gives up his life as Spider-Man for a while after Gwen's death, but after listening to her graduation speech, he is inspired to protect the city once again. It just so happens that Alexei Sitsevich had just broken out of prison and is now operating a large suit of armor developed by Oscorp, going by the name Rhino. The last shot we see is of Spider-Man beginning his battle against the Rhino. We don't ever actually meet Peter Parker in this universe, but we do meet a variant Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock is an investigative journalist who follows people who don't want to be followed. His fiancée Anne is an attorney for the Life Foundation, a genetics corporation founded by Carlton Drake. Eddie reads a confidential document on Anne's laptop that says there have been a number of poor people who have died due to being used as test subjects for their experiments. Eddie interviews Drake and confronts him about these unlawful experiments, but it ends up costing him and Anne their jobs, causing Anne to break up with him. 6 months later, Brock is approached by Doris Skirth, a scientist for the Life Foundation, asking him to help expose Drake for his inhuman methods of testing. They break into the research facility to search for evidence, but Eddie sees a homeless woman he had befriended named Maria is one of the test subjects. He tries to help her escape, but the symbiote possessing her transfers to his body and leaves her dead. Brock escapes, but soon after begins to have strange symptoms. Drake sends men to retrieve the symbiote from Brock, but the symbiote takes control of his body and fights them off. A chase ensues between them, leaving Eddie's leg broken, but the symbiote heals it before eating off the head of one of the men and running off with Eddie. The symbiote introduces himself to Eddie as Venom, telling him the symbiotes are looking to possess and kill the inhabitants of Earth. But Venom says if Eddie cooperates, he might let him live. They agree to go to Eddie's old place of work to turn in evidence of Drake's crimes, but after breaking in, they get surrounded by a SWAT team, so Eddie is forced to transform into Venom in order to escape. He reaches out to Anne and her new boyfriend Dr. Dan Lewis for help. Dan tells Eddie the symbiote is rotting Eddie's internal organs, so after Brock tells them sound waves and fire are the symbiote's two weaknesses, Anne uses an MRI machine to separate Eddie from the symbiote. Brock is soon captured by Drake's men, while another symbiote named Riot bonds with Drake. Drake agrees to help Riot with his quest to possess and kill all beings on Earth. In order to help free Eddie, Anne bonds with Venom and reunites them with a kiss. Venom tells Eddie he's changed his mind and wants to help protect Earth from the symbiotes, as he's grown a liking towards Eddie. The pair fight Riot and Drake, ending with Venom killing Riot and Drake after damaging the Life Foundation probe, causing it to explode. Venom manages to survive the explosion and secretly remains bonded with Eddie, setting out to protect San Francisco as a vigilante.
We Venom.
Venom and Eddie have to lay low for a while, with the FBI still investigating the situation at the Life Foundation. In this time, Eddie rebuilds his career, now becoming a print journalist for the Daily Bugle. He gets a request from Cletus Cassidy, a prisoner found guilty of multiple murders, to meet with him. He asks Eddie to print a message for him, and after Eddie agrees, Venom notices carvings on the wall. When they get to Eddie's apartment, Venom uses his photographic memory to redraw the carvings that prove as evidence of where Cletus left the missing bodies of his victims. Now having found his victims' bodies, Cassidy is sentenced to death. Later, Eddie meets with Anne, where she tells him that she and Dan are getting married. Venom begins wishing death on Dan, and Anne is able to figure out Venom is still with Eddie based on his reaction. She becomes frustrated and tells Venom to take care of Eddie and to not let him mess everything up before leaving. Following this, Eddie meets with Cletus again, and after being antagonized by him, Venom lashes out, allowing Cletus to take a bite out of Eddie's hand.
I have tasted blood before, and that is not it.
Back home, Eddie and Venom fight due to Eddie becoming sick of not being able to live his own life, and Venom feeling Eddie is ungrateful. Venom separates himself from Eddie and leaves, bonding himself to multiple people throughout the night before bonding with Mrs. Chen at her store. At Cletus's execution, a combination of the symbiote as well as he and Eddie's blood blocks the lethal poison, causing him to transform into Carnage. He and Carnage murder everyone in sight and escape captivity before rescuing his girlfriend, Frances Barrison, from the Ravencroft Institute, a maximum security facility. Frances is a powerful mutant with the ability to release a sonic blast when she shrieks. They plan to get married and celebrate by killing Eddie and Venom. When Eddie finds out of Cletus's escape with a monstrous being, he realizes the bite Cletus took out of his hand might be the cause of it. He calls Anne and asks her to find Venom, and when she does, she seduces him out of Mrs. Chen's body and brings him to help Eddie fight Carnage. Following this, Anne is captured by Francis in order to lure Eddie to them. Venom and Eddie arrive before Cletus turns into Carnage, causing Venom to bail.
Oh, shit! Where you going? That is a red one! You need to come out right now. I will let you eat everybody! Promise! I promise! Oh, yeah!
Francis lets out a sonic blast, damaging both Venom and Carnage, causing Carnage to smack her and tell her to shut her mouth. Carnage beats Venom down enough to revert him back to Eddie and forces him to watch as they kill Anne. But Francis tells him to stop, believing that is too much. So Carnage strangles Francis until Cletus begs him to stop. Venom uses the distraction to save Anne and bring her down to safety. Carnage then nearly kills Venom with multiple stabs before Venom swats a nearby Francis off the top of the building, causing her to shriek, releasing another powerful sonic blast. Carnage and Venom fall off the building with her, but with the help of Anne and Dan, Venom is able to catch Eddie before he lands, while Cletus lands completely separated from Carnage. Venom eats the Carnage symbiote as well as Cletus' head before Eddie and Venom go on the run. They flee to a tropical beach with Venom questioning where they will go next, and Eddie responding saying anywhere that needs a protector. Later, when watching TV in their hotel, Venom offers to show Eddie a glimpse of the 80 billion light years of knowledge across universes he has, saying it will explode his tiny little brain. They are then suddenly transported to another reality, and when Eddie asks Venom what happened, he is told that it wasn't him. We then see on the TV a news broadcast with J. Jonah Jameson reporting Peter Parker is Spider-Man.